Morning, Michelle.
Good morning, Carmen. So I see the Uri bulk mining bill was deferred to the 41st day, huh?
I saw that. Yeah. There were a couple of them yesterday. I updated the tracking sheet, so we could kind of take a look at it. Morning, Laura.
Hello.
Good morning.
How's it going?
Fantastic. It's beautiful and it's Friday.
Yeah,
Isn't it nice? Sun's shining, it's warm. Yeah.
crazy how nice it is out there. It's going to spoil us, and then all of a sudden,
Hi, Misty.
hi, Misty.
Yeah. We won't take too much of your time this morning, but we just kind of want to do a brief overview. I'm kind of over and over. So that's kind of what we thought would be a good starting point. And stuff situated. And of course, if you have any other ideas and things, that would be great. We just, hired, so. That is not gonna be working on, so we need to go into whatever you think. That's
Morning, Justin.
I'm muted. I was. Carmen, you know if Mary Arlington will be on the call today?
I thought she was going to be, but so far I've not seen her. I know she was waiting for an amendment, and I see that the bill is coming up next week, so.
Yep, on Tuesday.
Okay. Well, Justin, it's a little bit after. So in the interest of time, I'd say we get started.
All right, I'm going to start this out with an update on tax increment financing because this year TCSD decided to take a position on against a lot of these bills that have been filed this year, which are trying to restrict or repeal the ability of cities and counties to issue TIFs for the purposes of economic development. I think that was a good call. I think TIFs have been immensely beneficial in the past to the tourism industry, at the very least, for providing essential services and necessities in local communities that ultimately, benefit the overall industry. Now, a lot of hostile bills against TIFs have been filed, and so the governor's office, Senator Chris Carr, who's the president pro tem of the Senate, called a meeting with Municipal League and Elevate Rapid and one or two other people for the purpose of discussing a possible compromise with Senator Taffy Howard, who's the main anti-TIF person in the legislature. That meeting happened last week. And the good news is it sounds like we will have peace in our time. Sounds like they're putting together a piece of compromise legislation, which will put in place some protections and restrictions on TIFs that the cities and the economic development folks can agree to and live with. On the other hand, Taffy Howard will give up a huge number of other things that she is demanding that would have made it very difficult, if not impossible, to actually do TIFs. For example, it would have required that if a city is going to issue a TIF, it must get a vote of approval from the county commission for the county in which that city is located. So if you're Sioux Falls, you got to get approval from 2 county commissions. So there's other examples I could go into, but for now, we are all keeping our fingers crossed and holding our breath to see if we can sing Kumbaya at the witness table and say, hey, we support this because we can live with it. But we'll see. And so for now, all of the TIF bills on the list, I'm not going to talk about this morning because the hope is that they will all ultimately be moot or irrelevant. There's some bills on this list, such as House Bill 1286. Should have marked these better. House Bill 1286. I'll just talk about House Bill 1286. There are some bills on our list that have to do with the governor's future fund and other economic development issues at the state level. So TIFs are local. This would be at the state level. Currently, TCSD is neutral on those bills, but evaluating the possibility of coming out in opposition to them because, again, economic development, ultimately the hope is will be beneficial to the tourism industry. Those bills are opposed by the Chambers of Commerce, the Governor's Office of economic development professionals, and other groups. We're just working to kill those. I mean, that's at the end of the day, that's what they're doing. I mean, I think it's difficult. It's almost impossible to stop them in the first committee when they are put in House State Affairs. They almost always pass to the House floor, and then we manage to kill them on the House floor. So stay tuned. We will see what happens with bills like that. I'm looking at our bill tracker for TCSD. 1156 was withdrawn. Same thing with 1195. The first one dealt with extending the waterfowl hunting season for veterans and active duty military. The second one, 1195, would have provided free admission to state parks for enrolled members of Indian tribes. Both of those were withdrawn. House Bill 1265, interesting bill, has to do with salvaging eggs from bird nests. And coming from Representative Dylan Jordan from the Watertown area, that bill passed out of the House with 11 dissenting votes. Doesn't seem like it's going to be a big deal, but We'll see, we'll see what happens. We don't have a position on that one. House Bill 1273 came from Representative Nicole Uri-Bulk out of the Black Hills. She wanted to put in place some new restrictions and environmental protections dealing with mining operations. This was predominantly a Meade County bill. Originally, TCSD, for the protection and preservation of the Black Hills, had taken a position soft in support. We had a meeting of the LART committee day before last, I can't remember, where we discussed this bill among some others that we will talk about on this call. And LART decided, you know what, with all of the groups that are opposing it, because I mean, it was opposed by the groups I listed: State Chamber, Elevate Rapid, Economic Development Professionals, and others. With all those groups being opposed to it, and with it not being directly in TCSD strike zone, TCSD made the decision to be neutral on the bill. The bill died in its first committee 9-2. I think Representative Uri-Bulk was disappointed that, we went from a soft support to a neutral, but she asked me what were some of the reasons that influenced the decision, and I shared exactly what I did with her, and I think she understood, despite being disappointed, understandably. I'm going to skip House Bill 1277 for now, in the hopes that maybe we can see if Mary Arlington joins us on this call, because I think she can explain what's going on with the background a lot better than I can. House Bill 1281 comes from Representative Eric Muckey out of Sioux Falls. It would reduce the sales tax and use tax on food, which has long been a big goal of Democrat legislators. And it would raise the state sales tax by a bit. And so because our members collect and remit sales taxes, that bill is one that we're neutral on, but it's certainly on our tracker for that reason. House Bill 1284 is coming from the video lottery companies, but according to them, it's coming from the Department of Revenue, which has some issues with the issuance of these licenses and some confusion that is developed. So currently under South Dakota law, you can get a video lottery license for up to 10 machines. And originally, way back when, the law was, that's it. You get a license for 10 video lottery machines. That's what you get in your establishment. Then the law was changed to where you could string these licenses together in one building, provided each of the license spaces was separated by walls into different rooms, even if they were separate, even if they had an open doorway that adjoined them. They just had to have walls between them. So apparently an issue developed that Department of Revenue was being driven crazy by, and was making it a little bit of a burden to the video lottery establishments, that if you had a liquor license in one of those rooms, you could not take your drink that you bought in one of the rooms through the doorway to one of the other rooms with video lottery machines. It was a crossover. Again, it was a dispute, crossover, whatever, between allowing there to be multiple separate licenses in the same building for video lottery, but one license over here for one of those spaces for the liquor license. And this is simply trying to say, look, if you have these multiple rooms, each with its own separate video lottery license, but only one liquor license, that'll be sufficient. You can carry your drink from one room to the next. TCSD was originally soft opposed on the bill because we were worried about the impact it was going to have on hotels. And frankly, if you read the bill, it talks about hotels. So it seemed to be targeting us. Strangely, the Hotel Lodging Association did not have a position on this bill. They had talked to the video lottery lobbyist and some others. So LART had an additional call this week. Carmen had a chance to speak at length on the phone with Matt Krogman, who's the lobbyist for the video lottery organization. And LART made the decision to be neutral on this. Now, there is an amendment forthcoming. We're waiting for that to be posted on the system. However, it should make it even more clear that this is not intended to impact hotels. But we are watching this one closely to make sure it comes out ultimately in a form that doesn't impact us. Questions on that bill? With the warning that if you ask me technical questions on that bill, I probably will not be able to answer them, but maybe Carmen and I can tag team on it. Strange little bill. According to the video lottery folks in the Department of Revenue, it is simply intended to clean up this issue. 1288 is another mining bill. This is coming from Representative Terry Jorgensen. It would give political subdivisions in South Dakota more authority to issue mining ordinances. It is viewed as hostile to the mining industries and interests in the Black Hills. We are neutral on this bill right now for a lot of the same reasons we were neutral on 1273. Stay tuned. It's got more firepower, certainly, than 1273, which, coming from a Democrat legislator, was very unlikely to get traction. This one's coming from a Republican and is supported by a couple of legislators out in the Black Hills area. House Bill 1297 would provide for a study on statewide transit needs, the economic impact of public transit. I sent this one to Carmen because in the past, Tourism Coalition has taken positions in favor of bills that would, like, for example, last year and the year before, we had some resolutions, no force of law, but resolutions in favor of bringing passenger rail service, Amtrak passenger rail service, to South Dakota for the first time in our state's history. We supported that because anything that makes it easier to travel from one place to another within our state or to our state is something we would like. I just put this on the list for similar reasons. Check on the status. Never mind. It's been withdrawn. So sorry to waste your time on that one. House Bill 1299 is coming again from Representative Nicole Uribalk. More than likely, it's not going to go anywhere for that reason. I asked the hotel and hospitality industry what their position is. I don't think they have one yet. This bill would allow hotels and others with pool systems, with indoor water parks, etc., to use biological filtration systems in those water recreation facilities. I don't understand the background of where this is coming from or why. If anybody on this call, in the hotel sector would like to talk about it, I'd welcome that. But for our purposes, we're neutral on the bill unless and until we hear from the hotel folks or others that this is something we should take a position on.
It sounded to me, Justin, that this was something that a boutique hotel would probably use. I can't give you an example of what a boutique would be. Michelle, maybe you can chime in here. Maybe it's something like Moccasin Springs. I don't know, but it's kind of why we're staying a little neutral. But if somebody else knows, I'm all ears too.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything specific on that one to know what they're addressing when they say boutique hotel.
I haven't either, but I'll bet boutique hotel would also include like the Phillips.
That was the exact example I was going to use, the Phillips Avenue Hotel. That's definitely a boutique hotel. On the other hand, I don't think they have recreational water facilities.
They don't, but anyway. But it would be something like that, something that you're not branded with Choice or IHG or whatever that.
Okay. HCR 6003, also coming from Representative Nicole Uribalk, is just a concurrent resolution. It was intended to recognize the importance of conservation and restoration practices, water shortages, fire mitigation in the Black Hills, etc. Obviously, the tourism industry, perhaps especially in the Black Hills, really depends on beautiful natural areas and naturescapes. This is totally non-controversial. It's already passed both chambers of the legislature. Senate Bill 36 is a bill that we have taken an interest in because obviously the tourism industry doesn't want, whether in the Black Hills or elsewhere, wildfires. Wildfires are going to damage natural areas, which bring people to South Dakota, whether on the prairie or in our, Black Hills forests. This bill's coming from the utility industry, dealing with situations that have arisen in other states, particularly California, when utility companies have ultimately been determined, never intentionally, but always through accidents or whatnot, to be the cause of wildfires. There have been lawyers who have gone state to state and followed these wildfires and sued the utility companies. I think one recovery, according to the committee testimony, was $600 million from a utility company. And understandably, the utility companies are worried what happens if something like this happens and we're bankrupted out of existence. What happens to our customers? So this bill simply says we're going to put limits on the nature and extent of liability of a utility company in the event there's a wildfire that is deemed to be caused by that utility company's infrastructure. It would say, for example, no punitive damages can be recovered. And also you can't just say you're strictly liable because you're in the utility industry. I could go into great detail, having 20 years of law practice on litigation in the ins and outs of what this is, but ultimately TCSD is neutral on this bill because while all of our businesses depend to some extent on naturescapes and the natural world, at the same time we need electricity to be able to operate our businesses. So there's a nice balance here. Black Hills Energy, Jafar Karim, and Deborah Owen held a call with Carmen, me, and a couple of others a few weeks ago where they explained the bill in detail. I think LART has decided that this isn't our fight unless and until someone tells us it should be. Opposed to the bill are the insurance industry and the South Dakota Trial Lawyers Association. Not a surprise on the second one, really, or on the first one, given the fact that they're worried about who's going to have to pay out in the event of one of these big wildfires. Questions on that bill? Okay. Senate Bill 76 is the bill that perpetually keeps itself. Oh, well, good news. It's finally been scheduled for hearing. This is the airport bill. This is Governor Roden's proposal to take $30 million out of the Housing Infrastructure Fund, make two loans, each of $15 million to the Rapid City Regional Airport and the Sioux Falls Regional Airport. And those loans will ultimately be paid back, as the bill is currently written, to the READY Fund, which is underneath the Governor's Office of Economic Development. There has been a huge amount of pushback across the political spectrum to that concept. And we believe, although the amendment's not posted, the governor has agreed to change it to say, okay, fine, the loans will be repaid back to the Housing Infrastructure Fund, and we'll leave that fund untouched for the purposes for which it was founded several years ago. TCSD enthusiastically supports this. I will be in committee Tuesday, Senate Committee on Appropriations, to testify in favor of it. There will be a huge list of proponents who will want to testify in favor of it. So, as has happened the last several years, I suspect our testimony will be me getting up saying, airport's good for tourism, please vote for this bill, because there won't be time for more than that.
According to GOED on that Tuesday, she says they're not going to take testimony. More than likely, they're going to refer it to Senate Commerce, probably on the 19th.
Huh, that's good to know. That's weird. Okay. I mean, that's a good committee. I think our chances are fine there, but, and I suppose it doesn't have to go through appropriations since the money is already appropriated and sitting in the Housing Infrastructure Fund, but still making loans. Anyway, stay tuned. We'll have more information later this week or later next week. Senate Bill 96 is the governor's bill on property taxes. We don't have a position on this bill because we typically don't take positions on property tax bills because they And it's the same reason why the chambers of commerce, for example, do not take positions on these bills. They deal with owner occupied, which is residential. If there was to be a property tax bill that was going to shift to commercial, then I could see TCSD and some of the other business groups having positions on those bills. This is not that. The governor is going to proposes to give to each county in South Dakota the ability to impose an additional half-penny sales tax at the local level, and then use all the revenue to pay for property tax relief. We're neutral on this bill. I can tell you it is not popular. It is widely rumored that the bill is going to die because it does not have the kind of support it needs to pass. Time will tell. A similar bill, House Bill 1245, which is not on our list because it's, again, not really our issue, managed to pass the House by one vote this week. House Bill 1245 would give to municipalities the authority to put in place an additional 1 penny on sales tax to pay for specific projects, but that would have to pass. It would have to pass by a vote of at least 60% of the people living in that city in order to be enacted. So that bill barely made it out of the House. We'll see what happens in the Senate. I think it will be more difficult for it to pass the Senate, but time will tell. Obviously, a city doing an additional penny, a county doing an additional half penny. I mean, these two concepts kind of bump, just like some other concepts in the past. So we'll see. Stay tuned. But Senate Bill 96 is one that we don't have a position on right now. Senate Bill 102 is coming from Senator Dibert in the Black Hills. It has to do with Deadwood gaming revenues. Currently, under the way the law works, the Gaming Commission fund, and if there's anybody on the call who understands this better than I do, maybe Wanda, maybe somebody else, but ultimately this bill is designed to say that all of the Deadwood gaming revenues, instead of the first part going to the Deadwood Historical Preservation or the State Historical Preservation Fund, and then some of it going to the Deadwood Fund, Historical Fund, all of it will ultimately go first a little bit to the $100,000 to the State Historical Preservation Grant and Loan Fund, and then 70% of the access going to Deadwood. This would say all of it after that first 100,000 goes to the Deadwood Historical Preservation Fund. Anybody on the call? Did I say that right? Any corrections or revisions to that? Okay, we support this bill because we think Deadwood is definitely a jewel in the tourism industry in South Dakota, particularly in the Black Hills. And congratulations to anybody from Deadwood on the call on your 150th anniversary of your founding of your city this year. Pretty cool that it's the same year we're having the 250th anniversary of the United States. But good bill, we support it. Any questions or comments on that one? It is scheduled for hearing on Tuesday. And I'm now realizing Tuesday will be a busy morning for me. Okay. Senate Bill 109, another TIF bill I won't talk about. Senate Bill 131 passed the House passed the Senate with no dissent. This bill is simply intended to extend the special pheasant hunting season for disabled vets and Purple Heart recipients. That's it. Unlike the other bills, which would grant a complete exemption on hunting and fishing license fees to veterans or active duty military, or a total exemption for members of Indian tribes, this bill is just to slightly extend the season that allows those, decorated heroes to be able to hunt for a little while longer during pheasant season. No objection from GF&P to this bill. It was on consent calendar, and I don't think it's going to have any problems. We're neutral on it. Oh, Senate Bill 135 is a data center bill. It's coming from Senator Chris Carr and Speaker John Hanson. It's the Data Center Citizens Bill of Rights. It is intended to be from the anti-data center folks, their big bill that, will lock down the ability of cities and counties to, invest in data centers. No position from TCSD on the bill. It's pretty far outside of our wheelhouse, even when compared to the anti-TIF bills. Senate Bill 160 is the third and hopefully final regulation and licensure of fishing guides bill we're going to see this year, coming from Senator. Thanks, Wanda. Coming from Senator Tom Pischke from Minnehaha County. It's scheduled for hearing on Tuesday, and yet again would put in place a bunch of licensure and regulation requirements. It looks to me to be pretty darn similar to the bill that we just killed week before last that was brought by Roger DeGroot. It is before the Senate Ag and Natural Resources Committee. I encourage everyone on this call to contact all of the members of the Senate Ag Committee and encourage them to kill the bill. My guess is, I'll put a link in the chat here to the committee members. This is the members of the Senate Ag and Natural Resources Committee. My guess is Sidney Davis, Helene Duhamel, Brandon Whip, maybe Kevin Jensen will be no's. But this bill will be much easier to kill in the House. We're going to struggle to kill it in the Senate because it is coming from a very conservative legislator in the Senate. His comrades in arms in the Senate tend to stick close together, and depending on the bill, it's an automatic 15 to 17 votes in favor. So I encourage all of you to begin bombarding the members of that committee to encourage them to please vote no for all the reasons that we've discussed. That bill is. Did I say Tuesday morning again? Oh boy.
Hey Justin, is that one hunting and fishing guys, or did that one go isolate to just fishing?
I think
Just
that's
fishing.
fishing. Yeah.
Okay.
Now, here's the good news. One of the biggest lobbying firms in South Dakota is Redstone Law Firm. They have 1 attorney lobbyist and 4 boots on the ground lobbyists. They represent an organization of outdoor outfitters that up until this year only had hunting guides as members. Now they've added fishing guides, so they're helping to lobby against the bill. So we've got lots of people who are going to help us to kill this bill. This will, unfortunately, if it passes out of that committee and out of the Senate, it is purely a loyalty political move. It is not because of the merits of the bill, which is disappointing. 178, TIF Bill 188 is a bill that deals with aggregate mining. The bill's dead. It was defeated by the Senate Commerce and Energy Committee and opposed by the groups that I talked about earlier. 191, 192 are both anti-TIF bills. 195, if you remember several years ago when South Dakota was rolling in money because of the COVID relief dollars, we lowered our state sales tax from 4.5% to 4.2%, but the legislators insisted on putting a sunset on that so that it would revert back to 4.5 automatically in 2027. This bill would strike the sunset and make the cut from 4.5 to 4.2 permanent. The business groups, Sioux Falls Chamber and others, don't like that because right now we are we're not in the red, but we're not doing great. And the big 3, state employees, education, and healthcare providers, were originally proposed to get a 0% increase. Thankfully, this week, Governor Larry Roden announced revenue projections for the next fiscal year have improved, and therefore he is proposing a 1% increase for those big three. The point here is, if you want to do anything meaningful by way of property tax relief, increases to the big three so that we can keep providing essential services, and on and on and on, we need money to do it. And since we don't have an income tax, thank goodness, and since property taxes are only at the local level, sales tax is our way of bringing in revenue to the state of South Dakota to provide statewide essential services. So TCSD is neutral on that bill. It passed out of the Senate State Affairs Committee, I believe. Senate Committee on Appropriations passed out of there 6-3. The Senate was supposed to take it up on the 9th, then again on the 12th. They've now deferred it to next week. So stay tuned on that one. 196.99. Again, these are property tax bills. 201 is a bill that would allow you to use a drone to find hunting trophies. Would have allowed you to use a drone to find hunting trophies by way of wounded deer and elk. That bill was defeated by the Senate Ag Committee 6-1 week before last. 203, 207, 228. All three of those were TIF bills. 230 is to make an exception for improvement districts from a limit on revenue growth for the purposes of property taxation. This has to do with a type of improvement district that is not the ones we care about. I tried to get answers on what this bill is intended to do from Nathan Sanderson with the retailers. And I'll be honest with you, I don't understand what this bill is or does, but I know that none of the business groups are taking a position on it. And Senator Randy Dybert out of the Black Hills is the only one who's on the bill. If anybody on the call knows anything about the background of Senate Bill 230, I'd invite you to share that now. Let me read to you what. Okay. Short version. We limited new growth for property taxes last year in Senate Bill 216, the governor's bill, to 3%. This bill, or Senator Dybert's bill, SB 97, different bill, raises that to 5%, widely supported. That removed the cap entirely for community improvement districts, not business improvement districts, which is what we as a tourism industry care about, but community improvement districts. And it removed it. So only two CIDs in South Dakota, Dakota Dunes and Powder House Pass. The second one is in his district, Powder House Pass. So again, this is for community improvement districts, not bids. So probably not a bill we care about, but I did want to put it on there because it's under the chapter that we do care about, which is 7-25A. Senate Bill 243 would impose a transaction tax. This is a terrible bill. This bill is similar to the one that is currently being circulated for signatures to go onto our ballot in November, which would impose a $1.50 transaction tax on every retail transaction over a certain dollar amount and put all that money toward property tax relief. Nightmare to collect and remit for businesses, and frankly is just, it's not the way we do business in South Dakota. For any of you who are friends with Senator John Carley or who are a big supporter of his, what I'm going to say is not intended as a dig on him, it's just the reality. He's the prime sponsor. In short, he ain't having a good year on any of his bills. They're all being killed by these committees as being far too extreme. But this is one of his bills. I anticipate it will go in the same direction, but time will tell. Finally, SJR 504 is the bill that would put on the ballot in November, allowing sports wagering to happen statewide. It would still have to go through the servers for the casinos in Deadwood. So Deadwood is still the hub. just like in New Jersey, where their state constitution says gambling can only occur in Atlantic City, but they have interpreted that to mean you can gamble statewide for sports wagering on mobile apps and whatnot. It just all has to go through one of the casinos in Atlantic City. This would do the same thing. It leaves to the legislature to legislate how that program for statewide sports wagering is going to run. So I read it, and I think a couple of the other lobbyists I've talked to agree with this. I read this to mean the legislature can decide whether it's mobile app only, like DraftKings and whatnot, whether it is a kiosk, which must be in a licensed liquor dealer establishment, or both. So in other words, the liquor distributors aren't going to oppose it because it still allows the legislature, should this pass on the ballot, to make it by kiosk. That's the model they support. And as I think we talked about in our last call, in my opinion, that is the version that Tourism Coalition should support more, because if it's purely mobile app, I don't think you're going to see as many tourism businesses benefiting from that as you would if it was a kiosk model. So that passed out of the Senate Tax Committee by 1 vote. It passed the Senate 23-10. It's had its first reading in the House, but has not yet been assigned to a House committee. Speaker John Hanson typically puts measures into the same House that the Senate did. But in this case, Speaker Hanson is not a supporter of gambling, and I suspect he may put it into the House State Affairs Committee instead. If he puts it into the House Taxation Committee, it's in for a difficult time making it out of that committee. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. At least 5 of the 13, 5 of the 13 members of the House Taxation Committee who would immediately vote no on this measure. But we'll see. This doesn't have to go by the governor's desk. In the Senate committee, to give you an idea, Senate taxation, the measure was opposed by South Dakota Family Voice Action and the South Dakota Catholic Conference. It's interesting because notably absent from that list is any state agency or the governor's office. That is a direct and pretty important change from under the Nome administration, where the Nome administration opposed any attempts to expand gambling.
Hey, Justin, would the same revenue distribution on that bill follow the current Deadwood gaming revenue?
That's all going to be up to the legislature. But when they decide how they're going to implement it. But to your point, no, the additional revenue under 504, and this is one of the reasons why it has as much traction as it did. 90% of the proceeds from all taxes imposed on wagering on sports events by means of mobile or electronic platform must be used for property tax relief.
Okay.
The other 10% will be up to legislative discretion. I'm glad you asked that question, Kirk, because I'd forgotten that nuance. It was frankly genius on the part of Senators Crabtree and Colbeck to put that in there, because really it makes all of the people who are, pro property tax relief put their money where their mouth is on that. So I will tell you, there is a high demand in the state of South Dakota for statewide sports wagering. That is the end of the list. Governor issued his first veto this week, I think. Yes, this week. I can't remember. Anyway, on a bill that would have made it illegal, would have prohibited the use of cell-cultured meat, so fake meats, in South Dakota. That bill, he vetoed it, but he immediately announced a compromise on the issue. So that bill came from the South Dakota Stock Growers Association. What questions can I answer for the group? Otherwise, I want to reiterate again, as I have before during these calls and meetings, you as a coalition get way more than your money's worth for Carmen. Her services are amazing. She makes my job at least 10 times easier as your lobbyist. Her reports are incredibly thorough. We have a great communication system. I don't want to speak for Carmen. My interpretation, we have a great communication system. Every time bills drop, every time I find amendments, I send those to Carmen. She gets them on the list. She gets the information to everybody. I apologize, I did forget. Did somebody join the call who can discuss House Bill 1277?
Nope, Mary she didn't show.
All right, so this is one that the Tourism Coalition decided we're going to be neutral on. It is intended, so this is what we're told by the people who brought the bill. It is intended to address situations like what happened, the horrible, tragic situation with the flooding of the campground in Texas last year, where all of the children and others drowned. It's intended to try and say, if you have gotten approval for your campground area from the inspecting authority, then if some tragedy happens, some disaster happens, it will limit or eliminate your liability for any injuries or deaths. However, the version of the bill that got filed is not what Mary Arlington and the Campground Owners Association had actually requested. It's got problems. Ultimately, LART reevaluated it this week. We have concerns, but ultimately we have decided TCSD is going to very carefully monitor this one, just like 1284. We're going to wait from communication from our campground members, and we'll report further, but for now we are neutral on 1277. Okay, with that, I'll let everybody get back to your days and hopefully your 3-day weekends.
I had a question before you hop off.
Yeah.
For the sports betting bill, do you think there's any chatter about adjusting how the revenue would flow? Either changing the percentage, or is that like a key thing? Because I know sports betting's been talked about for years. And is property tax diversion the only way to get it done in your perspective? Or I'm just curious if when it goes to the ballot, you're going to have your sports betting people. You're also going to have your property tax people. Sometimes they're the same people, but sometimes they're on opposite ends of the spectrum. So just think out loud with me for a little bit there, what you're hearing.
I am hearing nothing about trying to change that. Now that you mention it, Laura, it's a fantastic point. Anytime you put something into the state constitution, your hands are tied unless you go to a public vote again. If it were up to me, I wouldn't have put the 90% mandate into the language, because if we ever get to a situation where, and frankly, I'll just say this out loud, for those of you who are on this call, I invite you to disagree with me. That's your prerogative. What we have seen as a business community, as the business advocates out here in the Capitol and talking about this statewide, is unfortunately, we're pretty confident that for a lot of the people who are screaming about the need for property tax relief, this is just a pretense. At the end of the day, the state of South Dakota has been in this situation before where, due to market forces completely outside of the state of South Dakota, property values go up. Inflation, the skyrocketing property values in the wake of the pandemic, those two factors were out of the control of South Dakotans. As was the massive influx of people from other states who didn't like how their states reacted, and so they came here and paid way above market rates. My point in bringing this up is, what we're now seeing is, in reaction to market forces, the property values are plateauing. They're never going to stop increasing, but they're plateauing to the point where it's not skyrocketing like it was for several years. So with that in mind, I'm with you, Laura. I would have concerns with tying our hands and saying, well, 90% of this great source of revenue has to go toward property tax relief. Now, the response from Crabtree and Colbeck, from Nathan Sanderson with the retailers is going to be this. Put the 90% of that revenue stream toward property tax relief. It just frees up other property tax relief from that we've got built into other areas. A perfect example I'll give you is your dad's fantastic bill in 2016 that increased the state sales tax by half a penny and put 0.2 of that toward property tax relief and the other 0.3 toward raising teacher salaries. That 0.2 is still going toward property tax relief. This would allow that instead to go toward other areas where we do need money.
Any other questions?
Okay.
Yes, you have a very busy week next week, Justin. Let me know if you need some help in some of those areas.
Apparently Tuesday morning.
So
Listen, I'll be there Wednesday, so that doesn't help you out, but I'll be there
Yeah,
for
well,
Tuesday.
Wednesday is a horribly busy day for me too. I've got some really bad bills up that morning too. So for another client.
Okay.
All right. Enjoy your weekend, everybody.
all right, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.